Behold my Skyrim daggers. I just finished up Mehrunes Razor, and I realized that I have 4 other Skyrim daggers, so I will talk about this. But let's go through my collection. The first one, chronologically, is Keening. So this, I believe, started as a commission. Many of the earlier things I did were commissions. This was probably 6 years ago. And all model made and molded and cast. And I will say, for something I made quite a long time ago, I'm still extremely happy with how this guy turned out. The gem looks really cool. It's see-through, it diffracts light. It looks really amazing. And this is one of the first things I think I cold cast. So this has a real bronze finish on the outside of the resin casting. And I'm still absolutely in love with it. This one in particular I finished last year with my buddy Norm over at Tested, one of their Tested Premium videos. Similarly, we did this dagger in one of their videos. This is the steel dagger, also from Skyrim. We did this one in foam. This is a foam laser cut project. So we laser cut all the layers and glued them together. So Norm's got one of these and so do I. The other 2 Skyrim daggers here were kits from friends. The first one was made by Will Morgan from WM Armory. For a while, Will was sharing my shop space with me, and when he was, he made this dagger. I can't remember which one it's called from Skyrim.
Cultist dagger.
Cultist dagger, there it is. Thanks, Britt, for the assist. Oh, that's right, because Will made a cultist costume. I forgot about that. Man, he made a really killer mask. If he still has the mold, man, I'd love one of those. You know, so I could put on a shelf and not paint it for 5 years. Anyway, similar to Keening, he cold cast this, but he used a copper powder, and this is a very dark copper. I have a couple of different copper powders. One of them is very orange. This one is more dark. It's a deeper, darker copper, and it just looks fantastic. Actually, both this one and this one were weathered using oxidation liquids to oxidize it. So the rust on here is real rust, it's patina, and it's top-notch work from Will. Casting in 3 pieces, one the blade and the handle and then the pommel, I believe. And very proud of that one, to have that one in my collection. This one came from my buddy David Reamer over at 00 FX. Also a kit. This one I finished. This one Will did all the finishing on, but this one I did all the finishing on. Another phenomenal kit. David's work is super clean and really easy to finish. So I can't remember. I think we probably did this on a live stream. There's probably a video for this one out there. But it's the Nordic dagger, I think. And I really love the finish on this. I made it look really dirty and gross and rusty and stuff. And I think I pulled it off. Anyway, that's the past. And now let's get caught up with the future. Mehrunes Razor. So when we last left off, this was primed, and I was going to sand and prime it one more time, and I did, and I'm pretty happy with how I got the overall finish on this kit from an old mold that there were some issues with. Overall, still very happy with how the kit turned out. The scabbard turned out really well too. I put a lot of thought into the finish that I wanted to get, and I did a bunch of paint tests. I showed those last week. I did some other tests just to figure out exactly what paint I wanted to use for the 2 tones on here. There's a darker tone and a brighter tone. My first thought was to do a gunmetal colored, just airbrushed acrylic paint here for that, and then the all-clad, more chrome looking paints. The only one I had on hand though was their steel, and after doing a couple of tests, it looked like it was about the same tone as this darker one. So instead, I just went with my Tamiya paints. I used their gunmetal here, and I used their chrome silver here. Super duper simple, airbrushed, dries really fast, and I'm super happy with how it turned out. Before I put all that paint on though, I added this texture, and I think that's the detail I'm the most happy I spent time on. The original from the game looks like it's got some sort of fun mottled texture going on, and I tried to replicate that with a brush years ago when I painted these, and it worked okay, but adding a real texture and just well, doing some dark weathering that like washes over it helps, but doing that little bit of rub and buff over the top really helps give this a little extra zing, and it's especially obvious when it's moving in the light, and it kind of catches an edge that's just got a nice little highlight on it from that rub and buff. And I did that texture inside of here too. What's really cool about that is I try and get 3 tones out of a prop when I'm painting it, when I'm weathering it especially. Your mid-tone, whatever your base color is, so in this case it would have been the gunmetal, and then your darks, so I did a dark wash over this using oil paints on this one, and I wiped most of that away, so there are spots in the crevices where you get those darker tones, and then I want to get a light tone, so that's where the little bit of rub and buff on just the highlights of that texture come in. So it's subtle until you really pay attention and look closely, but we have our midtones, we have our darks, and we have our lights going on in here. There's a little bit of color too. The weathering paints I used both black and brown paint. I didn't use any rust colored paints. So for on my steel dagger here, I used some burnt siennas, darker rust type colors, because this is, well, it's not a steel dagger, it's the Nordic dagger, but I would guess that it's made out of steel. Steel rusts red, like we normally would see in the real world. However, there's no indication that Mehrunes razor is made out of steel. It's probably some sort of Daedric ore that you can only get in Skyrim. And on the model, it didn't look like there was any rust on it. So I did add some browns to get some warm tones in here, but I didn't add any rust. And that's kind of the thought process I go through when I'm deciding how I'm gonna weather something. Good example, I used real oxidation on the bronze here, and I get those cool greens and oranges. Naturally, that just happens because that's what happens when you rust bronze. But if I was trying to paint this finish and do that weathering and rust look with paint, I wouldn't use iron oxide colors. I wouldn't use those traditional rusty steel colors like burnt sienna. I would use teal, like a lightened teal, to get that green patina look. So yeah, I try and think about what the material is that this thing is supposed to be made out of when I'm doing my weathering. If it's made out of aluminum, it's not gonna rust red. Aluminum oxidizes in its own way, if that's the look you're going for. And that's what's fun about prop making. We have an opportunity to do a little bit of storytelling with the things that we make, and I think I did a pretty good job of telling the story of Mehrunes razor. And I sure had a lot of fun putting it together. Something we didn't showcase in the main video, but I think it's fun to point out, is that this was cast from, I think it was like 45D or something like that, smooth cast 45D, known as an impact resistant resin, which means it's slightly flexible. I'm not gonna bend it a lot, but you can see that it actually has a bit of flex to it. So I think if this were like a stunt dagger for in a movie or something, they'd go with something that's even more flexible. But this is actually quite durable because of the flex in it. The scabbard has a little bit of flex as well. I don't want to bend either of these too much because I don't want the paint to chip off. But yeah, we just happened to use this resin to cast it, and it worked out really well. But it's got a little bit of give to it. I think that wraps it up for this chapter of my Skyrim dagger saga. I'm not currently planning on making any more of them, but there are a lot more and they are really cool. So who knows? Maybe I will. I do hope you enjoyed hearing my story of all of these fun daggers, and of course, wrapping up the dagger, the Mehrunes razor. I'm so happy that I finally finished this and painted one up for myself. Scratch that off the list and then eagerly look at the pile over there and see what I might be able to finish next. Maybe it'll be the Needler. Who knows? I don't know if I'm good enough yet. I think that wraps it up for this batch of the project here. Where it's all done, video's out. Hopefully you've seen it already and enjoyed it. We had an awful lot of fun putting it together, and I just hope that you guys have fun watching it. Thanks, as always, for hanging out with me and chatting with me and asking me questions down in the comments. I love hearing back from you guys. And as always, thanks so much for helping us out. The consistency, the income we get from you guys on a regular basis is one of the only consistent things in our life, and we appreciate it very much. It makes all of this just a little bit easier to make work. So thank you very much. We'll see you next week with another super fun project.